We're joined by Rajeev De Mello. He's head of Asian investment in Western asset management, overseeing around $480 billion. Thanks for joining us, Rajeev. First, this delay, is it a surprise to you in this report which could label China as a currency manipulator?
Well, the U.S. has been, very careful and, very, dexterous in playing the relationship with China on the currency side. And they delayed it once earlier this year, from April. They delayed it about 3 months to give China time to actually change its policy somewhat, which it did in June. On June the 17th, China moved towards a more flexible exchange rate, so it was a success. Now we're once again in a little bit of a concern as the midterm elections approach, and there is more pressure on China again. We just saw the passage of this bill through the House of Representatives in the U.S., which is more symbolic than real, but does add to pressure. So I think that what the U.S. is doing right now is actually delaying the publication of this report to allow China to move its currency somewhat more before the midterm elections, before the G20 meetings, finance ministers, and the summit in Seoul.
Yeah, what do you expect to come out of that? I mean, are we going to get another anodyne statement, do you think?
Well, we used to getting those. I think that there's been enough comments coming out that there'll be a bit more pressure for something to happen. However, I don't think that we'll get a new Plaza-type accord. Those are really the two ranges. One, an anodyne statement, or a new Plaza Accord. I don't think we'll get any big, change in the system right now. But I think we will get some progress in terms of the currency appreciation before the meeting. I think countries want to avoid being singled out in these kind of forums. So they will move probably a bit more before the meeting, and that's why I'm actually quite optimistic that China will allow its currency to appreciate in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, the debate is intensifying really when it comes to the foreign exchanges, and people are now beginning to question the entire system, right, and the US dollar as the fulcrum, if you would, here as the reserve currency. What's your view?
Well, for the time being, it's very difficult to find an alternative as a reserve currency. We heard a lot of market participants and reserve managers have diversified partly out of the US dollar in the course of last year, mainly into the euro, and that, of course, created some nervousness when the euro had its weakness as well. So we had some diversification into the yen as well in July, and that was widely talked about. So there's obviously some nervousness about the dollar remaining a reserve currency, but it's very difficult to find an alternative right now. Yeah.
Yep, very quickly as well, Rajeev, before we leave things, we of course awash with stories about currency wars, etc. at the moment, and competitive devaluations. How real is that, or is it something that the media is really playing off?
Well, the word currency war really sounds very catchy, and it has made headlines world over since it was mentioned by Brazil a few weeks back. Very catchy phrase. I must say there is some tension between the currencies. Obviously, there are different objectives. I mean, the Fed has a dual objective, which Ben Bernanke didn't fail to emphasize in his speech on Friday, a dual objective between maximum employment as well as inflation. And on that standard, the Fed thinks that it should lean towards more easing. Since it can't cut rates anymore, it is going to move towards some kind of quantitative easing. Now, that is viewed as being negative for the dollar, would debase the dollar, would attract more capital into emerging markets and other countries, and that's where the word war is. But I mean, I'd have to disagree with that, because a war, there are winners and there are losers, there are fighters and there are defenders. Whereas in this situation, all the participants know that it's a win-win or lose-lose. They all depend on each other. China depends on the US depends on China, and Asia depends on its exports to other countries too.
Rajeev, thank you so much for joining us. Rajeev De Mello, they're joining us there from Singapore.